Welcome to Macmillan 180. For nearly the past 25 years, students and faculty of the University of British Columbia's Animal Welfare Program have gathered here to share ideas, learn, and enjoy lunch. To celebrate our 25th anniversary, the Animal Welfare Program hosted a series of webinars to virtually invite our diverse alumni to join us once again around the table to ruminate in room 180. My name is Megan Locke, and I work with the Animal Welfare Program. I will be the host of today's podcast. On March 6, we were joined by Liv, Erin, and Nadia to discuss how to achieve change for wild animals. Liv Baker holds a bachelor's in biology and chemistry, a master's in organismic and evolutionary biology, and from UBC, a PhD in applied animal biology. Liv is a conservation behaviorist and an expert in animal well-being. She researches how different animals engage with their environments and their roles in the health of their social groups, cultures, and populations. Erin Atman-Ryan obtained her bachelor's and master's in applied animal biology at UBC, with her master's research focused on humane rodent control. Erin is a proud member of the Salish Nation and is an experienced science communications specialist working with the BC SPCA Science and Policy Division in wild animal welfare at the time of this webinar. Nadia Zanakis also obtained her bachelor's and master's in applied animal biology at UBC, with her master's research investigating the effects of pigeon contraception on mitigating human-wildlife conflicts. After graduating, Nadia became the Urban Wildlife Programs Coordinator at the Stanley Park Ecology Society, and after this webinar has recently moved into the role of Specialist Wild Animal Welfare at the BC SPCA. British Columbia is an incredibly biodiverse province, and conflicts are bound to occur between humans and the animals that we attempt to coexist with. From large mammals such as bears to small mammals such as mice, wild animal welfare is a pertinent local issue that professionals are actively tackling. During her time as an undergraduate and graduate student, Erin learned about the meaning of working in an applied field.
What applied biology means is that we're solving problems and taking complicated science and complicated viewpoints, and we're combining all of that into how can we fix it, or how can we improve it, and how can we better the lives of wild animals. So that requires a number of different approaches that we have to figure out ways to navigate them all, including doing the research to figure out what changes need to happen, and then writing the policy reports and the documents that actually make this change possible.
On a similar vein, Liv shared advice on how to navigate the complexities of working with and for animals in modern society.
Advice for anyone working in the world with animals and for animals is to understand that all animal-related issues are interconnected and entangled. I think we should be really careful about siloing ourselves in our professions, because this also speaks to what I was saying about embracing the complexity, because if we are too siloed, we lose a lot of our understanding about animals and making meaningful connections with other animals and actually meaningful interpretations about the lives of other animals. So I think really understanding that interconnectedness, that entanglement, in particular because of the role that humans have in this 21st century landscape and the impact we have on the lives of other animals.
As a follow-up to discourse brought up by Liv on slow science, an audience member asked her how we can slow down science when academia encourages fast dissemination of knowledge.
Things are against slowing things down and against slow science. It's not easy. I would say, outside of that, specifically when I think about the applied work that I do, so like the work that I do in Thailand, one of the things that slows things down is you don't make decisions by yourself. Your decision-making is not tapped down. That really forces you to slow things down, to consider the opinions, the thoughts, the needs, the knowledges of others, both humans and non-humans. We collaborate with the Krin Indigenous people and we collaborate with the elephants. Part of that is to understand what the animals want in their lives, to ask for consent.
Nadia and Erin both work locally in Vancouver at the intersection of urban communities and wildlife. They bring to light some challenges that they face when advocating for improving wild animal welfare, especially given the common perception that wildlife does not belong in modern cities.
In my work, I deal a lot with public, and the two big barriers for me is one, this very common theme of, through a very colonial lens of like land entitlement in wild animals in particular, not wanting them on the landscape because they're a nuisance. An example of this would be, I'll get a phone call of a resident in West Vancouver, and to quote, they said, "I pay property taxes. I don't want to deal with coyotes and raccoons." That's an extreme example, but that mindset I find is like quite pervasive when trying to get people to coexist with wildlife. So that is a really big challenge.
My challenge that I identified was quite related. Growing up, I feel like my attitudes towards animals, the treatment of animals, were very much instilled in me by my grandfather and the Silks values of our people. And for me, all animals held value, whether they were my own cats or dogs, or they were the family of foxes that had made a den under our porch. And I find sometimes I have to check myself because that is something that inherently matters to me. But when I'm trying to talk to other people, realizing that although they may consider themselves an animal lover, they may hold different attitudes. And that certainly creates a bit of a barrier into tackling this work, is that not everyone inherently cares about some of the wild animals, or they place them in different categories of wild animals that they consider pests versus wild animals that live out in the forests and the mountains where they can't see them.
Meanwhile, Liv's work has an international scope. She works with people and wild animals through the Mahouts Elephant Foundation, which is a Thai and UK nonprofit that helps improve the welfare of Asian elephants in the tourism industry while simultaneously improving the livelihoods of the people or Mahouts involved.
So one of the major projects I have is working with Indigenous communities within Thailand. And so part of our work is to help find alternative economies so that the people can stay in their homes, can continue to protect the forest that they want to protect, and also keep the elephants within the forest. And in order to do that well and to make it sustainable, is you have to have real collaboration. And that means slowing things down. It is not fly in, fly out conservation. That is colonial conservation. And so in order to really create meaningful projects that can lead to improved well-being for humans and non-humans, that's about slow science, and it's about true collaboration. And that's both a challenge, but that's where I found my greatest successes as well.
Throughout this webinar, all of our speakers touched on the balance between animal conservation and individual animal welfare. A classic conservation approach aims to benefit populations, even species and the environment as a whole. On the other hand, animal welfare tends to be very individual-focused. That is why a compassionate conservation approach may be warranted, which is a scientific discipline that combines the principles of animal welfare with the conservation of wild animals.
The research I would love to see going forward is applying a compassionate conservation lens to understanding like what are the actual costs associated with weaving in animal welfare in conservation practices and understanding the barriers to that.
How do we make decisions when it comes to wild animal welfare if there are so many pieces to consider? Look to the article International Consensus Principles for Ethical Wildlife Control, published in the journal Conservation Biology in 2017. Our very own Dr. David Fraser, with many of our alumni, including Erin A. Ryan, Liv Baker, and Sarah Dubois, who have participated as speakers in our webinar series, took part in an important workshop of experts hosted by the AWP back in 2015. The group of experts, dubbed the International Expert Forum on Wildlife Control, identified 7 principles for managing human-wildlife conflict, which are still proving to make an impact today. The British Veterinary Association has just recently updated their policy statement on animal welfare to recommend these principles. There is still a long road ahead with considering the animal welfare of individual animals in conservation practices, but Nadia ends off with a note of optimism.
A lot of wild animal welfare kind of gets jumbled with like environmental research. When you're trying to convince people to care about individual animals' welfare in these issues, it is so easy for you to get immediately disregarded because it seems like the other issues are more important. So it does seem like there's a problem, in my opinion, moving forward with trying to tie in individual animal welfare with conservation practices, where we now have kind of compassionate conservation being a topic that seems to be a bit more well known now. So trying to tie that all in can be really difficult. So that is a challenge I think we might have going forward. But I'm excited for research aiming at solving the individual animals' welfare while we're considering all these other huge environmental problems at the same time.
Thank you for listening to our March podcast on achieving change for wild animals. You can find the Animal Welfare Program on our website at www.awp.landfood.ubc.ca and on our Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter social media channels. Join us next time for an episode on achieving change in research.